Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a striking development on the battlefield in the Sumy Oblast region of Ukraine, where a reported bridge strike has dramatically affected the advance of Russian forces. The action centers around a tactical blow delivered by Ukrainian forces that apparently halted, or at least severely disrupted, an incursion by Vladimir Putin's troops. It's a story of infrastructure, logistics, strategy, and the human toll of war, so let's unpack it to begin. Let's set the scene. For months now, the Russian military has been pushing into northern Ukraine from the border region, targeting Sumy among other places. According to reporting, Russian forces took control of more than 150 square kilometers of Sumy Oblast in less than 2 weeks in early June 2025. The goal appears to have been to establish a buffer zone inside Ukraine to protect territories inside Russia from Ukrainian action and to gain ground near critical towns, but then comes the twist. Ukrainian forces reportedly conducted a precision strike on a bridge used by Russian troops and supply convoys. The destruction or disabling of that bridge had the effect of halting or at least severely impeding the Russian advance. By breaking a key link, Ukraine disrupted logistics, resupply and troop movement, which in warfare is often just as decisive as direct combat. The targeting of infrastructure in war, especially bridges, rail lines and supply routes, is a long-standing tactic. With movement slowed, forces become vulnerable, supply lines stretch, morale drops, and defenders can regroup. In this case, the bridge strike appears to have had multiple effects. First, it forced Russian units to stop or reroute, cut off by the inability to bring in heavy equipment, ammunition, fuel and reinforcements as easily. With those constraints, the offensive momentum slows or stalls entirely. Second, it gave the Ukrainians breathing space in the region around Sumy, enabling defense lines to stabilize. Indeed, the top Ukrainian general declared that the advance of Russian troops in the border areas of Sumy Oblast had been halted, and that the line of combat was stabilizing. Thirdly, beyond the tactical, it had symbolic value, showing that Ukraine could reach and strike infrastructure deep in contested regions, thereby raising questions about Russian supply chains and their presumed security. Let's look at what exactly might have happened operationally. A bridge carrying vehicles, troops, armor, supplies is struck perhaps by artillery, missile, drone or a combination. The crossing is destroyed or rendered unusable or dangerous. The Russian advance stalls because the lead units either cannot push forward without support or become cut off from support themselves. The defenders use this pause to fortify positions, conduct counter fire, disrupt any attempted crossings, and pick off isolated units. In short, one well-placed strike can have ripple effects far beyond the immediate blast zone. Of course, in war nothing is quite straightforward. The Russian side had reportedly made gains and pushed close to the city of Sumy, reportedly 25-30 km away at one point. But the disruption of logistics and infrastructure appears to have changed the calculus. The pace of advance slowed, and the opportunity for the Ukrainian defenders to stabilize increased. Turning to implications, this development is important for both sides. For Russia, it means the forward momentum they sought has been checked. That necessitates either a renewed offensive with higher cost or a strategic rethink of how to supply and reinforce in the border region. The need to rebuild or find alternative routes to keep the push going would slow operations and increase vulnerability to Ukrainian attack. For Ukraine, this strike is a morale boost and a message that even when the front seems to favor the enemy, targeted action can tip the balance. It underscores the importance of disrupting logistics rather than only engaging in head-to-head clashes. But there are broader strategic implications too. If Ukraine can strike bridges and supply lines reliably, it forces Russia to invest heavily in protection, diversion, redundant routes, which all consume resources and reduce the effectiveness of the offensive. It also means a long war of attrition becomes even more costly for Russia. For Ukraine, it means that defensive operations can become more proactive. Strike the movement, strike the supply, and the enemy comes to you in a weakened state. We must also remember the human cost in such operations. While this particular strike was aimed at military logistics, the proximity of these operations to civilian areas means always a risk of collateral damage. The region of Sumy has already suffered from missile and drone attacks. Civilians live under threat of cross-border fire, bombardment, infrastructure damage and war disruption. The shifting front lines and the delays caused by destruction of bridges, roads or rail-effect evacuation routes, humanitarian access, supply of food, power and essential services. It's worth noting that the Ukrainian general emphasized the need to build up anti-drone corridors and fortifications in the region to consolidate the gains of halting the advance. That speaks to the next phase of warfare. Once you stop an advance, the next job is to make sure the enemy cannot resume it easily. You build defenses, you bolster supply, you gather intelligence, you interdict the enemy's next lines of movement. From a video review perspective, what would you want to show? You'd open with footage of a bridge strike or its aftermath, vehicles destroyed, collapsed structure. Then you'd overlay maps showing Russian advance into Sumy Oblast before and after the strike. You'd include commentary from Ukrainian and Russian sources on the progression of the advance, the effect of the strike and what it means. Interviews or statements from Ukrainian generals or analysts would be useful for context. For example, that the advance has been halted and that strengthening of defenses is underway. And you'd show the human side, civilians evacuating damaged infrastructure, local residents coping with disrupted supply lines, as well as the military side. Russian vehicles stalled, Ukrainian artillery or drone action, engineers repairing or trying to bypass destroyed routes. In terms of narrative flow, start with the rising pressure, Russian troops advancing and threatening Sumy, then the turning point, bridge strike halting the advance, then the aftermath, how logistics and supply disruption worked in Ukraine's favor, stabilizing the front, then the bigger picture, what this means for the war going forward, and finally a closing reflection on the human cost and what viewers should keep an eye on in coming weeks. E.g., whether Russia finds alternate supply routes, whether Ukraine expands the interdiction campaign, how civilians in the Sumy region fare. Some important notes and caveats. We don't have full independent verification of every detail of the strike timing, exact effect, units involved. War zone information is often subject to fog, propaganda, conflicting claims. So while the broad effect, a halting of advance in northern Sumy region, is confirmed by Ukraine's top general, but the specifics of the bridge strike, which bridge, exact units destroyed, supply columns quantified, may still have gaps. Also, the war is dynamic. Russian forces have other axes of attack, other supply routes. Halting one advance doesn't mean the offensive is over. The question now becomes, can Ukraine capitalize on this pause? Can they push back, or at least ensure stability and prevent further incursions? And can Russia recover, adapt and resume with different tactics? In closing, this episode in Sumy is a microcosm of modern warfare, where precision strikes on logistics and infrastructure can shift momentum, where the battlefield isn't just tanks and infantry, but drones, missiles, bridges, supply chains, where local geography and local infrastructure become frontline assets, and where the human stakes, civilian lives, damaged towns, disrupted homes, are ever present behind the military operations. Thank you for staying with me through this. If you found this review insightful, please like and subscribe, and drop a comment below. What do you think the next move will be in the Sumy region? Will Russia find a way around the damage? Will Ukraine press its advantage? I'll be watching the developments and will revisit when there's further news. Until next time, stay informed and